All right, I just finished watching the Avatar television show and wanted to talk about it. It might be a little weird hearing this from me, but I enjoyed it. I liked the show. I'd never watched the show when it came out. I was probably in my early 20s at the time. I thought it was, I'm not going to watch this kiddie show on Nickelodeon. And then after hearing so much praise about it, like years later in my 30s, I started watching it and I fell in love with the show. I thought it was a great show. A really great show. I think I watched this series probably twice in my lifetime. Don't remember everything about it, but I remember enough about it. Started watching this show, figured it was going to be garbage. Started off kind of awkward, but then I quickly started warming up to it. So first things first, I'm glad, obviously, that they decided to go the route that they were supposed to go and to make these people more akin to Asian people as opposed to what they did in the movie with M Night Shyamalama made, where he made the good guys white and he made the bad guys Asian. Pathetic loser. So I appreciated that. Not everybody was Asiatic, but what are you gonna do? As far as the casting, I didn't like Aang in the beginning, but I warmed up to him. I'm gonna say fairly quickly, maybe. They weren't able to make him the happy-go-lucky character from the show, but I think I appreciated this a little bit more. I think, damn, I knew I was gonna forget these people's names. God, whatever the kid's name is, the brother. Right now I'm talking about the three companions, Aang, Katara, and wow, then the brother. I can't believe I forgot. I literally just finished watching the show. I forget the brother's name, but the brother, I think he was like the perfect casting. The clumsy comic relief kid. I really can't believe I forgot his name. He was the best casting in the show. He looked the part. He played the part. He was serious when he needed to be. He was goofy when he needed to be, and him being goofy wasn't too cringy. The Katara girl hated that casting. I didn't like her. She's not a good actress. She wasn't able to really. Towards the end of the season, she started to improve a little bit, but then fell off again. Her acting ain't great, and it wasn't the writing. It was just her acting. It was just she's that was not. They shouldn't have cast her. They must have not interviewed her or tested her or anything. They must have just said, "Well, this girl looks like an Inuit, so bring her in." So didn't like her at all. Zuko didn't feel like Zuko, the look, anyways, in the beginning, but he was again perfect casting. Did a great job as Zuko. His uncle was his name Iroh. I forget his name. See, I'm really old. I'm forgetting these people's names already. His uncle, great job. The casting in this show, other than Katara, was really great. The characters looked like the characters for the most part. They all acted well. The acting was great throughout, except for Katara. So I loved the casting. I'm gotta give him praise for that. The the effects, the effects were pretty bad. And when I say pretty bad, I don't mean like like comically bad or horrible, but for what we are able to do in this day and age, they were pretty bad. There were times when the effects were good. There were times when the effects were all right, and then there were sometimes where the effects were bad. And I'm saying sometimes, but a lot of the backgrounds, the locations that they were in, just looked like a green screen. It looked like they were in a room. It looked and felt like they were in a room. And I talked about this when I was talking about One Piece season episode 2 in One Piece felt like they were in a room. You could just feel it. It didn't feel like they were in a location. And there was a lot more of that in this show where it just felt like they were in a room and there was a green screen. I'm going to give them a pass this time. Normally, if your effects are bad, you kind of get dogged for that. But I'm going to give them a pass because for the most part, they tried to stick to the story as much as possible and the story was good. The story was really good. I'm going to say the story was good to great. And it's because they stuck to, from what I remember, because again, I haven't seen the show in a while. I'm sure there are purists who will probably watch this show once a month, and they know every nook and cranny of the damn story. I'm not one of those people for anything, except maybe Lord of the Rings. So there's probably people that know a lot more than I do, but from what I remember, this was pretty close to the story, and that's why it was good. You stick to the source material. That if you're making something based on how popular it is, then stick to the source material. Don't stray. They strayed here and there in little ways, but for the most part, they stuck to it, and that's why the story was good. So if the story's good, the acting's good, the casting's good, I'm not going to complain too much about the effects, because the effects are really, if you have a good story, the effects should just be like the icing on the cake. It's not the whole cake. It'd be, if they were great, it would be even better. But if the effects aren't great, but the story, the characters, the casting, all that other stuff is great, then you give it a pass. So the effects had issues, but I'm gonna give it a pass because it felt like I was, you're watching a television show. This isn't a fucking Hollywood movie, and it's a long show. You got to start taking things into account. This shit costs money. It costs money to do this, and if you put all of your money into the effects like some shows and movies do, and you skimp on things like story or even costume, character development, which this didn't have too much character development, but character development, you skimp on the important stuff, choreography, then you just have a good looking piece of garbage. So the effects should just be like the icing on the cake. The cake though got to be fucking good, and the cake in this instance it was good. Again, the story was good. There was times towards the end of the story where it pulled emotion from me. I mean, like real emotion, and that doesn't happen to me ever. And when I'm watching stuff, but it did, and that's a credit to the story, and it's a credit to the original story from Nickelodeon because that show is such a great show. It's a credit to that, but it is a credit to the showrunners of this show because they decided to stick to it and try to be as faithful as possible. So I would, again, I hate Netflix, and I wouldn't recommend anybody paying for Netflix, but if you can catch this for free somewhere, I highly recommend you watch it. It is a good ride. It's an interesting ride. And I may be biased because I do love the show so much, the original show, that I may be biased. Maybe there are people who aren't fans of the original who don't get as much enjoyment. I don't know. I don't see why you wouldn't, but I would recommend it that you go and see it. I enjoyed it. I binged it. Well, not binged it. I watched some of it last night and most of it today. But I binged through it, and I didn't get bored. I didn't get tired. I mean, it's not the greatest thing that I saw, but it was good enough to keep me interested and to keep me caring, and that's an important thing. You care about these characters. Again, a lot of the stuff that I'm saying about this show, it really is from the original Nickelodeon series because again, they tried to be as faithful as possible. So the real credit goes to the original story creators and writers of the Nickelodeon series. I don't want to give all of this credit to these people that are making this Netflix show because they just really took from those original stories and those original ideas. But since I'm talking about this show, it's I'm talking about this show. So the Zuko and his uncle, that whole dynamic was so great in the original Nickelodeon series. For a fucking children's cartoon, it was very emotional, it was very well done. And were able to successfully translate it over to this live action show. Again, because of the casting, because of the writing, being faithful to the source material, you were able to get that in this show. That emotion between the two of them, the development of Zuko, great. Great. It was great to see it in live action. That was to me the best part of the show is watching Zuko's his tragic life and his progression, how he's going to eventually change over. All of that stuff was great, and it was well done. The actors did phenomenal jobs. The writers did great jobs. So you had stuff like that was pulled over that made the show great. Now, The reason the show's not great for me is it felt kiddie. It felt like a kids show. There was a lot of kiddie feelings in the show, and I'm a grown adult that watching that stuff is kind of painful now to watch. Just, I don't want to watch a kids show. I'm gonna say it felt more kiddie than the damn cartoon. But before I go into that, it felt kiddie, but the show's supposed to should be for kids. Well, I have 2 points to that. The original show came out in 2005. So let's say you were 10 when that show came out. 2005, you were 10, or, well, I guess you could watch it when you were 10. But the original fans, the kids, are like in their 30s. So I don't see why you couldn't make it more adult, because it's just really for the fans. You obviously it's going to be for a new audience. I don't know why necessarily, but whatever. But you could have made it a little bit more adult, because again, the original fans are like in their 30s and 40s at this point. So why not make it a little bit more adult? You really know that those people are going to be the ones paying attention to it. Again, they're the ones that made it more viable, made it this big, popular, powerful thing. So if you're going to make it for them, make it a little bit more adult for the adults. With that being said, there were many moments throughout the show where it felt more mature. And again, that's from the Nickelodeon show. The show had that good mix, which is why I was able to watch it in my 30s and stomach it, even though it was a kid's show. It had that good mix in the cartoon. But in here, it also has that. So while there were a lot of moments that felt kiddie, especially in the beginning, which I excuse because the protagonists are all children. They're all kids, especially the main protagonist. He's a child. So it has that child feeling because it's dealing with children. So if I don't want to feel like I'm watching something kiddie, then I shouldn't be watching it. So, but it had a lot of that, but it also gave you a lot of that mature feeling as well, and that was sprinkled in throughout the show. So it felt like if you watched this as a kid, let's say you watched this when you were 12 or 15 or something like that, and you're an adult now and you have your own kids, you could watch it with them. The child could enjoy it and you could enjoy it. So that's a good thing. I give them credit for that and a lot of respect there. The show started off kind of weak for me. It felt weird. Again, the effects kind of was like, oh, then Katara's horrendous acting. The old lady in the village that was probably one of the worst performances I've seen in my entire life. I'm being, sarcastic. Well, I'm not being sarcastic, but I'm exaggerating. But it was pretty bad. So I'm like, oh God, this show's gonna suck. The actors all suck and the effects look like shit. But then you had other effects that were okay, that were fine. So the show started off kind of bad, and I'm worried for the show. And then as it started to progress, it started to get a lot better and a lot better. And then it started to reach these great heights. I think it peaked for me at episode 6, which was, I think, Masks. That was an unbelievable episode. And then it dropped a little bit for me, but it didn't drop too bad. It just was like, all right, well, you have peaks and valleys when you watch these shows. So I enjoyed the show. The costumes, got to give them credit for the costumes. The costumes were unbelievably great. Unbelievably great. While the effects were bad, the effects plus the settings, the way that they set up certain areas, the locations reminded you of Avatar, and it felt like you were in these worlds. So the effects weren't horrendous and unforgivable. You had like I said earlier, you had bad times with the effects. You had some good times. You had some great times, and the certain locations that you got to felt like the great times. You got to see these big cities, these different cities. I remember when at the end they went to the Northern Water Tribe, and there were like bridges and streets that looked like they were from the cartoon. That's how accurate they were. It felt like not felt like it when I watched it. I'm like, oh shit, that's one of the fucking bridges that they have the fights and stuff on. And this was as soon as we get to the village, so. Locations were great. Costumes were unbelievable. You had great choreography in there. I love seeing a lot of I don't call people subtitles because when we talk about white people, we don't say European Americans. We just call them Americans. So I'm not going to say Asian Americans because that's fucking disrespectful. A lot of American actors who are of Asian descent, like Daniel Day Kim. I forget her name. If I'm saying it wrong, then oh well. What are you gonna do? Tamlin Tomita, Tamblin or Tamlin? I don't remember her name. This American actress of Japanese descent who I've loved since I was a little kid when I first saw her in Karate Kid 2. She was in Joy Luck Club. She's in this, and they're all doing great jobs. It always distresses me when I watch these shows and movies that have these actors of Asian descent who are Americans who you don't see on a regular basis because they're not white. So they don't get cast and stuff isn't written for them. But when you do get to see them, and you get to see them and they come back, this other actor who I forget his name from Rush Hour.
Now wipe yourself off. You're bleeding.
I think he did a great job. I love seeing all of those people back, and you have this cast of people of Asian descent. It was great seeing all the different Asiatic people. So you had your Eastern Asian people, you had your Southwestern Asian people, Western Asian people. It was great to see all of that, and the way that they used each village to kind of show these different groups. Again, great, top notch, loved it. There was no diversity inclusion, and that made the show better. So instead of the stupid bullshit that was done in The Witcher, where you have Polish people and then you got Asians and blacks amongst them, and it doesn't belong because it's a fucking Polish show from Poland. So instead of having that stupid shit where you're just trying to be diverse just to be diverse for whatever dumbass reason, they stuck to the story. And this is a show that happens to be about people that are from Asia. So that's what we got. That's it. And I'm glad that they did that. You didn't have white people walking around or black people walking around in these places. The show, it stuck to the source material and it did it properly. And it made the show more grounded, not more grounded, but more, it made you feel like you were actually in the world. And I appreciated that. The bending. Bending did unbelievable jobs. That's the choreography. So the effects, again, you had your issues and you had your great parts. The effects were utilized perfectly for the bending. It didn't look cheap. It didn't look fake. It didn't look bad. It looked like they were actually bending and properly. I guess the weakest one was the water, maybe, but you know how you gonna? It's hard. Water is always difficult to do digitally. But everything else, the movements, everything was sort of faithful. Being able to see certain animals and characters from the cartoon in here, like I have to say they did a good job. A really good job. What else? What else do I have to say that's good? I don't really have anything that's really too bad, except until I get to the end. I don't know how people are gonna take this, but I don't give a fuck. The girl, again, I forget all these people's names, Zuko's sister, and the two girls that are with her all the time. Costumes were great. The actresses did, from what I could see, the little parts they had, they did great jobs as well. But I'm just curious, they got like these like chubby girls to play them. I didn't understand that. And I'm like, why? One of them was just downright fat. And I was like, oh, okay, that's not how they are in the cartoon. So I did, and it's not a bad thing. But these characters got to be active, at least in the next season, because they fight a lot. So is that fat girl going to be, I don't know. I know people are going to get offended, but I'm not trying to offend anybody. I'm just not understanding why they took characters who were very slender or athletic and made them fat. I don't know why they did that. It was weird to me seeing the girl. His sister... Again, the actress did a great job. I didn't have any issue with that. It just looked weird. Like it would be like making a movie about Fat Albert and then picking Dave Chappelle as Fat Albert. It's like, well, he's fat. Why are you picking someone that's skinny? That's how I'm looking at it. I'm looking at these characters. I'm like, why is this girl so fat? These characters aren't like that in this cartoon. So that was a little weird. And then one of the major issues that I had with it. So this woman empowerment thing that started, I don't know, in the mid to late 2010s and just got worse and worse and worse. And now we're where we are now. When you look at shows like this show came out in 2005, probably about more than 10 years before this whole woman empowerment shit started. This show, this whole series, this bending series, this Avatar series, has always been not about woman empowerment, but a big part of it was woman empowerment. You have Korra, who grows to this great warrior. You have the I don't know the girl, the that girl with the painted face. She she belongs to this like whole troop of woman warriors. You had them; they were all great and exceptional. You had Zuko's sister, who was better than Zuko and most of the men in the firebending army. You had her, the two girls that fought alongside her. They were unbelievable warriors. One of the avatars that Aang has to interact with. She's a female. She's very strong. You have all of these strong, capable female characters. You have again, I forget her name, the little rock bending girl who we haven't seen yet. I honestly can't wait to see her in the next season. But the little rock bending girl who's what's her name, Toph or something like that. The blind girl that don't wear shoes. Again, another strong female character. You have a lot of strong female characters, and then in the next show, Korra is the main character who is the strongest character in the show. The main protagonist is a female, and that show culminates in her having a homosexual relationship with another strong female. So these stories were always about woman empowerment. And that kind of lets you know that this whole bullshit about, oh, well, we need to make women look powerful because women don't have representation is all bullshit, because that has been happening for a long time. It's been happening my whole life. But this show, which came out in 2005, has been happening not since then, because it's been happening my whole life, but it's been happening for a long time. So I'm watching this show, and this may be petty and little. I mean, not petty, but people may think of me as petty, and it may be little to a lot of other people. But I would normally sing this show's praises and just say give it more praise. But there's this one thing that kept me from doing that. So you have Katara, I'm sorry. Katara in the cartoon. She's she's a waterbender. She hasn't really been trained because her village has been destroyed and they've been focusing on just surviving. She meets up with Aang. They start on this journey. She starts training herself. She starts to try to train herself, and she learns and she becomes good at it all on her own. Great. What makes her even better is once they get to the Northern Water Tribe, she meets up with these masters, and she wants them to train her. And they have this thing where we don't want women to fight, and it's not a misogyny thing. It's more of we want to protect our women because we want the women learn healing, and the men, we throw our lives into the garbage by sacrificing ourselves to protect the women, because the women birth and take care of the children and heal the children. So as men, we're not trying to be misogynistic, but we don't want our women throwing their lives in the trash because we view them as more valuable. So to the stupid LGBT people out there who when they see those types of messages think that men are being misogynistic, no, you stupid cunts. We value women so much that we will sacrifice our lives. We throw our lives as men in the trash because women are that high to us. As heterosexuals, we understand the value and the perfection of the woman. So we try to preserve that value and that perfection as long as possible and as much as possible. So when conflicts happen, we're not going to tell the fucking women to go sacrifice their lives. We do that. We want to protect them. That's why. It has nothing to do with misogyny and everything to do with us trying to protect this perfection and this value that we see in women. That's why that kind of stuff is done. So in the cartoon, the men in this village, they're like, look, the women are used as the healers. We sacrifice ourselves so we learn to fight. We don't teach the women to do that because that's our role. And again, this show was about woman empowerment, but it did harp on a woman empowerment a lot, and even in the original show. So Katara kind of convinces him, using the skills that she built up all on her own, that, I'm not weak, I should be trained. And he relents and eventually starts to train her, and he helps her become better.
Realizing that his stubborn adherence to custom had cost him a wife, Paku consented to teach both Aang and Katara, the latter learning and improving faster than any of his students.
So in this fucking show, because you have these LGBT people who are trying to, I don't know what they're trying to do, trying to erase roles, they decide that they're going to remove that. And that bothered me a lot. That bothered me a whole lot, because all the other male characters had to develop these skills through training and time. Aang had to grow up. All of his youth was spent living amongst these monks, and they trained him and all the other monks how to do these things. Who else in the show? There are not even that many fucking males for me to talk about in the show. Zuko had to spend his life learning to be a warrior and learning to be in this army, so he had to train and spend his life doing that. And they both, Aang and Zuko, both had trainers to train them. And then Katara comes along and she trains herself a little bit in the show, which is fine. In the cartoon, she trains herself a little bit, but then she gets actual training. But in the Netflix show, they're like, no, fuck that. She don't need no fucking training because she has a vagina hole. And the vagina hole gives her the power to surpass all of that and to bypass all of that. So she don't need no fucking training. She almost beats a water master all on her own. She practically beats Zuko all on her own. And then at the end, the water master is like, why don't you train people? You're so good. You train on a little flying bison. That means you're a goddess now. So now you train everybody. I'm going to have you be one of the masters. And again, we wouldn't have a problem with her being a master, because in the original show, there are a lot of, like I just went over this whole list of these powerful women. They're in the show, but it makes sense in the show. In here, it's just like, no, just because you have a vagina, you're going to be good at it. Just because you're a woman, you're going to be better. And again, there's no reason to do that. This show was made by men. They wrote woman empowerment in the story. They're more, as far as the main cast, the main group of characters, there are more strong women than there are strong men. Because Katara's brother is kind of develops into somebody who is a little bit better, but he's like comic relief. He's a joke. Zuko's a villain. And who else is there? The Jet Kid, I guess, maybe. So what, there's maybe 2, 3? There's a lot more of the female heroines and protagonists or strong women in the original show that was written by these two men. So you don't need to do no feminist message, because the feminist message is already in the show. You don't need to make it even more feminist. Just stick to the fucking story, where this girl, she develops some skills on her own by training herself. She gets some real world combat experience, so she does develop. But she's not a master, because all she's really doing is looking at a fucking pamphlet with pictures in it. You can't be a master looking at a pamphlet with pictures. There's not even fucking words. It's just a scroll of images of people making in poses. And that makes her almost as good as, if not better than, the other masters, just because she has a pamphlet with some poses. That doesn't make any sense. In the original story, it makes sense that, fine, she's out there in the world, she's going through this adventure, she's picking up these, she's strengthening the little bit of skills that she may have gotten when she was younger, but then she meets this master, and the master makes her even better. In this show, no, she just, because we want to blow smoke up women's asses and make them feel strong, because women always need to be told that they're strong for some reason. I don't know why you always need to tell a group that is already strong that they're strong. That doesn't make sense to me, but you want to do that, so then you're going to put this stupid feminist bullshit in the show, and I don't like that. And again, it shouldn't be a big deal, but it is at this point. You got in the show, the message to Katara's brother is that being a warrior isn't strength, doesn't mean you're strong. You don't have to be a warrior to be strong. But the message to the women is just train and be warriors. Throw your lives away. That sounds like a message from jealous homosexual men. It doesn't sound like a feminist message. It sounds like someone's trying to trick women into throwing their own lives away. Why would you tell the men Oh, don't be a warrior. Don't throw your life away. You can be strong by not being a warrior. And then tell the women, yeah, you need to be warriors. You need to train and be warriors. And when the fights come, you need to throw your lives in the garbage. I don't get that shit. Only somebody that's jealous of the perfection and the value that's within women would try to convince them that they should throw their lives away and sacrifice themselves. Stupid shit. So that, and that was at the very end of the show. So that kind of really threw me. With that being said, and that putting that, trying my best to put that feminist bullshit aside, I really enjoyed the show. Everything other than that, and I didn't dislike Katara, the actress that they used as Katara, because of that feminist thing. I genuinely, she just was bad in the role. She's not a good actress, and they should have cast someone else. She's one of the main cast. But other than that, the story was, other than that, I want to get that out there. Other than that, the story was really good. I want to say good to great. Again, they stuck to the original story, so kudos to them for doing that. Stuck to the original story as much as they could, because there were a lot of changes. But they stuck to it as much as they could, and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the characters. It seemed like the Fire Lord, Zuko's father, was given a little bit more screen time, which I appreciated that. And I liked it as a whole. I really enjoyed it. And I'm looking forward to... At first, I was like, oh, they're going to cram all of this into season 1. But no, they're moving on to... Hopefully, they only have one more season. At first, I thought well, how can I put this? The pacing was fast. It felt like the pacing was a little too fast. But then you have to remember, look, these shows take time to make. The characters are kids, so shit, you don't know. The actor playing Aang, he might hit puberty and then next year be like 6 feet tall. And that's not, so you gotta, you kind of have to, for a show like this, you can't just do 4 seasons, because you're working with time and puberty of the child actors. So you don't want in 2 seasons, fucking Qatar comes out with double D breast size. You're like, whoa, how do we now? We got to cover this up because this girl now looks like a woman, and the boys now look like fucking men. One of them is 6'2", the other one is 5'11", and their voices have changed. So you're working against time. So you got to be a little quick, but you don't want to be too quick. And it seemed like that's what they did here. Look, let's try to get as much into this season as we can. Let's try to make this only 2 seasons, maybe 3 tops. Get this done before these kids grow up, and then we'll just have this nice story and we'll wrap it up. You can't just do a continuous story with these people because they're not cartoons, they're humans, and they grow and change. So when it started off, I'm like, they're moving pretty quick. But then the show kind of settled down a little bit. And it kind of moved at a pace that was reasonable. I'll say that. It was a reasonable pace because I understood why they were moving at that pace. And I understood certain things. Certain issues that I had with the show were explainable, and it made me understand why. It wasn't like a lot of other shows and movies where they're just being pathetic and lazy. It felt like here they were doing it because of budget and timing constraints. So I kind of excused a lot of it. I was like, oh, let me excuse this because there's a budget. They're spending a lot of money. There's a lot of main actors and characters that you have to pay. It's a lot of people with speaking lines. Costumes have to be made, a lot of extravagant costumes. We got to put money into these effects because, the effects aren't super great. It's an effects heavy show. So I kind of gave him passes on that. And again, with the whole children thing, I understand the time why. So hopefully, if I was doing it, I would probably just film it all in 1 year. Be like, look, guys, this is going to be a 12-month job. You're going to get paid for. We're going to pump 3 seasons out of this 1 year, and then spend your time editing and wrapping up the show, the other seasons. Just get it all done. Hopefully that's what they did, and they're not waiting to film the next season, but we'll see. So again, I don't support Netflix, so don't pay them if you can't, if you don't have to. Just try to catch this for free, and if you do, check it out and let me know what you think.